I actually cannot believe what is happening. This is the third time I'm recording this episode. The first version I transferred to my PC and I was going to edit it. I deleted the original on my phone. I'm going to edit corrupted. Second version, I was reading an excerpt from a book and I turned this way and I turned back. It wasn't recording and I was like, oh, okay, then storage ran out again. So I'm going to check where I stopped talking in the video, and the video is also corrupted. So we start over. Happy new moon in Gemini. Actually, as I record this, the moon is in Gemini and I'm losing my mind. What kind of tricks are these? Happy new moon in Gemini. It's so interesting. Oh my God, you see? It's not a new moon, it's a full moon. Happy full moon in Gemini. Episodes are every full moon. I have no idea why I've been saying new moon. Happy full moon in Gemini. I actually am losing my mind. Things are coming full circle, and they're not the type of things I want to talk about in this episode, so I guess we'll talk about them at the end of the episode or next year. This month of December is special because this month began with a new moon in Sagittarius. Literally on the 1st of December, the new moon was in Sagittarius. You know what? I have to pause because the place I'm supposed to be reading stuff from, the battery is now running low. Okay, now we are back. And this time, I will end my speech every 10 minutes or 19 to 20 minutes so that it doesn't get corrupted again and I have to restart. So let's just get into it. In this episode, I want to talk about the previous episodes, and it's something I've been planning to do. Like every quarter of the year, we look at the previous 3 episodes and see what is it we have learned further, because learning never stops. And in this episode, I was talking about how the month began with a new moon on the 1st of December. And this month is special because it's beginning in a new moon, new moon in Sagittarius, and it's ending in a new moon in Capricorn. And what's interesting again is that this year, the first new moon of the year was a new moon in Capricorn. That's really interesting to me. And new moons represent new beginnings. Full moons represent endings, things coming full circle. And that's why this podcast is called The Wall, where things come full circle. So let's get into it. So episode 1, we talked about which was the introduction of this podcast, why this podcast is called The Wall. And if you're new here, the wall means wall is one of the Korean words for moon. And that's why this episode is called The Wall. It's not this wall here. And no, I did not mistype this wall or try to be fancy in how I'm saying wall, like we're sitting by a wall and everything. So that's why this episode is called The Wall. You can go listen to episode 1. This podcast is called The Wall. You can go listen to episode 1 and find out more about this podcast. And then I also talked about friendships and therapy and realizations about therapy, because yes, I'm going back to talk about therapy, realizations I've made again. Last year in November, I went for therapy and I quit therapy because the therapist was grossly unprofessional and unethical. And there's a relationship between friendships and therapy right now. And it's about misery loves company, dwelling on the past. And dwelling on the past in the sticking in the past, not doing anything better for yourself type of way. I had a conversation with a friend and I was talking to her about how the things I've moved on from, and it's like many people find it difficult to comprehend how I move on from traumatic events or horrible events in my life. They expect me to stay there. And I was talking to her about people who I'm friends with, and we both have the same injuries, the same wounds or similar wounds and injuries. And I personally made the choice to move away from those wounds, those injuries, do better for myself. And I actually told these friends, hey, by the way, we need to do better. We can't keep being here. We can't keep wallowing in our pain and stuff. We need to do better. And they're like, yeah, we do need to do better. Now, Michelle went and did better. They stayed there. And it began bothering me every time we have conversations. They bring up the past and they get so upset that I dealt with the past and I moved on with my life. They also don't understand how my life is better when theirs is not. I moved on from the past. I refuse to dwell in the past and everything. And in therapy, that's what happened. I went for therapy for a particular reason. But this therapist did not deal with that reason. And this therapist wanted the sessions to be trauma dumps and everything. And I'm like, I don't want to talk about those. I'm way past that. And then she'd be asking things and I say, and she's like, why are you not crying? Yada, yada, and stuff. And I was like, I've moved past that. And I'm a therapist also. So I could tell where she's going. And this therapist had actually forgotten that I am a therapist. That's why I don't like telling therapists that I am a psychologist, I'm a therapist and stuff. I just got there, however. And she was thinking I'm just some little girl. The way you're seeing me right now on the podcast, if I take off this wig, you think I'm like some teenager. You think I'm some 15-year-old who is on December holiday. So she thought I was just some little girl. And she's like, why are you not crying and stuff? And she was trying to diagnose me with things that fall under personality disorders like narcissistic disorder. What's the other one? Narcissistic, histrionic, and antisocial, especially antisocial personality disorder and stuff. And I asked, then she kept talking about how I should get on medication, if I could get a solution and stuff. I'm like, are you trying to call me schizophrenic? And if the solutions, I'm open to them, as long as it's not medication. And she was getting upset that I'm refusing to be medicated. Some of these therapists actually get commissions for medicating their clients. And in this country, the reason why people are still stuck in depression and stuck in many problems, nothing is getting better, is because the therapists are unethical and unprofessional, and they're medicating them and making sure they are hooked on them, they're actually attached to them and dependent on them, and they're making sure that this client never ever finds solutions or a way out, never finds the answers within them, because they are a check to them. So they make sure they keep you there in therapy. They rope you around in therapy to collect money from you. So I quit. I quit therapy because I was like, what is this? What is actually happening here? And it also made me realize that people don't understand how I move on so fast from things, because I do. That thing I cried about in the morning, you're not finding me crying about it in the evening or tomorrow. The people who said I complain a lot, and yeah, they're valid for saying that, especially back when I was in high school and stuff. And I am glad I never stifled my complaints. I'm glad I actually complained, because niliongea hiyo kitu ikanitoka. Because I swear, if I kept all those things in, what would I have been today? Who would I have been today? I spoke and spoke until I felt lighter. And there is a poem in Ehime Ora's book Ancestors Said, where she talks about your body is not a coffin for you to bury pain in it. Find somewhere to release that pain, get that pain out of your body. If you're watching on YouTube, here it is on the screen. People watching on YouTube are getting to see it on the screen. People who are reading this on Wattpad, attaching a screenshot to the poem and everything. So yeah, I'm really glad I actually spoke about it. And I want to read you something from a book called Women Who Run with the Wolves. And it's related to all these experiences, friendships, therapy and stuff, where I'm trying to move on to I'm not even trying. I'm actively moving on to the next best thing in my life. But people want to keep me in the past, keep me in the pain. And this is in chapter 8 of Women Who Run with the Wolves, I believe. I just remember the quote and I'm reading it because I highlighted it. If you are striving to do something you value, it is so important to surround yourself with people who unequivocally support your work. It is both a trap and a poison to have so-called friends who have the same injuries but no real desire to heal them. These kind of friends encourage you to act outrageously, outside of your natural cycles, out of sync with your soul needs. And I really do recommend Women Who Run with the Wolves. When you start reading it, you may be like, I'm not getting it. When you read the first few pages, rather, let's just say the first page, you'll be like, I'm not getting it. But the more you read it, you're like, wait a minute. And you can find the audiobook on YouTube. Just search Women Who Run with the Wolves audiobook, and you'll find the whole audiobook on YouTube. Each video is a chapter. Very good to read. And in episode 1, I also had 4 questions, but I only answered 3 of them, and that's what we're going to look at. Like the first question was a year without romance. This question was about me finding out who I really am. This question was about me finding out who I really am, or if I'm influenced by K-pop, K-drama, romance movies, everything romance and music. Because one of the things I did this year, actually my main agenda for the year was I'm not going to watch any romance movie, any K-drama. I'm not going to listen to any new K-pop song. I'm actually not even going to listen to K-pop. I actually deleted my K-pop playlists, removed them from my Spotify downloads and everything. I'm not going to listen to any newly released song, music. I had an exception, just one artist. But everybody else, everything else, even Japanese movies, dramas, Chinese movies, dramas, everything, I'm not going to watch. Because I wanted to know, Michelle, who are you when none of these things are available in your life? Who are you? Okay, I only had one book I said I would read if it has romance, which is the Clockwork Prince series. I'm in book 2, by the way, now. I was in book 2 when the year began, and I'm still in book 2, like chapter 1. Or am I in chapter 2 now? I don't know. I ditched it somewhere along the way. That's the only book with romance I was actually going to read. Yeah. Turns out, with or without all those things, this is who I am. This literally is who I am. I'm not influenced by them at all. Like, this is who I am, with or without them. This is who I am. Something else this year is that Venus is not retrograde this year, and I knew I need to harness that energy. It's the perfect opportunity for me to see things very clearly. Love, what I like, my aesthetics, who loves me, who is jealous of me. Like, Venus rules jealousy, so with jealousy comes envy and monitoring spirits, and I was able to see people so clearly and myself so clearly with Venus not being retrograde, and I'm happy I actually did that. The second question was I love bombing? Because people have made it very clear that I am too much. But the same people who've made it very clear that I am too much, they've also made it clear that I am not enough. I've been wondering if I'm love bombing, and I've come to that, no, I'm not love bombing. And I'm going to read you something. You see? Oh my God. Every single time I spoke about this in the corrupted episode, the previous episode was corrupted. Every single time I spoke about the haters and naysayers, my crown fell. Literally. If you're watching this on YouTube, you've seen my crown fall. If you're just listening, then yeah, my crown has fallen when talking about the haters and naysayers, the tweet and deleters, all of those people. I was reading this book, and we'll talk about this book later in the episode and how I came across this book. I was reading this book today, and there's a part that says, all of us have had this experience. At some point, we have each said through our tears, I'm suffering for a love that's not worth it. We suffer because we feel we are giving more than we receive. We suffer because our love is going unrecognized. We suffer because we are unable to impose our own rules. And by the way, I bought this book by accident, not knowing it's a romance book, because one day I flipped and I was like, oh my God, the top is written, to love is to lose control. I don't think it's clear on my screen. Okay, it seems clear. To love is to lose control. I was like, oh my God, again. The only book I've consciously bought because it's romance is a book called Brida. It's the only Paulo Coelho book I've read. Yeah, I've not read the other books. I've not read The Alchemist. Yeah, I haven't. Brida, because I was in my lover girl era. I was 19, and I don't even know. Yeah, I walked into a bookshop, textbook center in Galleria, and then I walked to Paulo Coelho's section, and I saw, oh, this cover is nice. The red-haired girl is nice. It reminds me of Princess Merida from Brave. And when I looked at the back, it was like, but how will I know who my soulmate is? I was sold. I was sold that line. I bought the book, and I barely found any romance in that book, by the way. If you found romance in Brida, let me know. I barely found romance in that book. So I wasn't love bombing anyone. I was loving people who are not ready to receive love. And I was loving people. I was pouring out my love to people who did not deserve my love, by the way. And another realization I made, which is very painful to even admit, is that I was loving people more than I loved myself. A bitter truth, by the way, a bitter truth. But I have accepted it, and now I'm loving myself more. and it ties onto friendships, because you can't be a good friend to anyone if you're not even a good friend to yourself. As long as you're not a good friend to yourself, you're not a good friend to yourself. As long as you're not a good friend to yourself, you can't be a good friend to anyone. And as you can see, my crown is not falling and I'm looking down. At that time, I wasn't even looking down, my crown fell. And then also when we circle back to year one, I wanted to say, like, this is literally who I am. Look at my sofa. It's pink. I'm looking at my pink plushies, by the way. The blankets I have in my living room for my sofa, for like when I decide I'm gonna sleep here today or I'm just gonna chill here, is pink. The mat I'm stepping on is pink. The bonnet I remove so that I can put on this wig and not come on here with a bonnet is pink. The bag I've just looked at is pink. Actually, I've looked at so many pink things right now. Pink. So this is actually who I am. Is who I am. It really is who I am. And then third, how have I contributed to friendships that were unsatisfying, unfulfilling, and did not serve my highest good? And this is going to be short because I'm just going to put it straight, point blank. I have contributed to unfulfilling and unsatisfying friendships that have not served my highest good because I'm just nosy and empathetic and formally without boundaries. So I'm a former nosy, empathetic, no boundaries girl. Now, because I was nosy, I would be like, yeah, I'm going to know what the person's business is, and they tell me. And it's like tragic, so I'm empathetic, and knowing what it feels like to be alone, to go through things alone, to not know the ropes, to be around people and feel like I am alone, to feel like I am in a box, I'm in a pit, I'm in a dark well somewhere, and I'm waiting for someone to come and save me, but nobody's coming to save me. I did not want somebody else to feel that way. And now you see, there were no boundaries. Disaster. Total disaster. Because you can't be nosy and empathetic and not have boundaries. You can be nosy and empathetic here. But imagine being nosy, empathetic, and no boundaries. Oh my God, you're going to be in problems. You're going to be in problems. That's what happened to me. But I have accepted myself, and now I do have boundaries. I may be nosy, I may be empathetic, but I have boundaries. And I am withholding myself more because of those boundaries. Because not everybody deserves that side of me. I got hurt really bad this year. Really bad. It's been horrible. It has been horrible. And then in episode 2, we talked about generational curses. And what I have learned between then and now is that I cannot save someone who doesn't want to be saved. And I'm going to give context about how this came about. I share so much on social media for free. I talk a lot on social media. So much insight. Even in my books on Wattpad. Even here on this podcast. Even on my previous podcast, Triangulated the Podcast, where we talk about the shape of everything. I share so much insight, and I became frustrated and stressed about the events in the lives of people I assumed were close to me, and I was close to them. I assumed we were close to each other. But I came to learn that people actually muted me because they saw me as too much on social media, too negative, and know-it-all, and they were like trying to prove a point that I'm wrong and stuff. So everything I had warned about and given scenarios, like at least 2 or 3 scenarios. Sometimes I just give one scenario of how things unfold when you do certain things, when you take certain paths in life. Yeah, they went to take those parts in life to prove a point to me that I am wrong, and they ended up being the statistics I spoke about, and some of them in worse situations. And then that's when they come back to me, because you see, the well they had filled with all my love ran dry when they muted me and they came back for more water. And me being the nosy, empathetic, no boundaries girl, you know how that went? And I had to learn that I can't save people who don't want to be saved. Another case is, it's the same as people who have parents who are either tribalistic, classist, or they're ethnocentric in one way or another. And they don't like their parents' sentiments, and they decide they're going to teach their parents a lesson by getting into relationships or friendships with people who they know their parents specifically hate because of race, tribe, class, religion, to teach their parents a lesson. But Have none of them stopped to think, even if the parents are very awful people, this person who's known me ever since I was conceived until today, don't they know more about me than this person who I'm going to use as a tool to prove a lesson, to prove a point to my parents? Even if my parents are horrible, at least they know me more than this, better than this person. And at least they've experienced more in life than me. And as much as their sentiments are awful and I don't agree with them, they have their reasons. Biased, yes. Awful reasons, yes. They have their reasons. So you go and marry that person from that tribe your parents don't like to prove a point to your parent, and you get done exactly how your parents warned you, or even worse. And now you become worse than your parents. You do not become your parents. You become worse than your parents. It's the same thing. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. I can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. And on this journey of mine, breaking generational curses, I've broken them successfully. I clap for myself, and my ancestors are so happy. They are so proud with me. They are so proud of me, by the way. They're like, yes, you made it. You literally made it. They're so proud of me, and I'm proud of myself as well. I have learned that on this journey, I cannot be a bus picking people and going with them and going to one destination. I can't even be a bus going to a different destination as them. I just go on my journey, I'm walking, and whoever wants to join the path and clear their own generational curses and their own generational curses and trauma, they can join. But me stopping to bring people along to hold hands has worked against me. Seriously worked against me. It seriously worked against me, and I'm not doing it. Whether it's a relative, whether it's a friend, I can't save you. Even if you want to be saved, the only one who can save yourself is you. Then episode 3, which is our last episode, we're talking about your history, and I shared my history. That episode was very emotional and very difficult. I took a lot of crying breaks, by the way. I took so many crying breaks in that episode, and that's why you don't see my face in that episode. I could not do it. I could not show up on camera for that episode, and I'm glad I scripted that episode, because if I just started speaking freely, yeah, at least it didn't fall. Yeah, you see, I would have forgotten myself. And that's interesting, because I actually have a card titled The Crown, and the message on the card is remember yourself, remember who you are. I would have forgotten who I am. Yeah, I would have cried and cried and cried, and I would have not posted that podcast episode. So I've still been learning about my history. I've tried asking around the people who are lying. The people don't tell me anything. And I knew that would happen. And I told my ancestors, this is what might happen. So you guys have to tell me our history, your history about yourself. And one way or another, my ancestors have been giving me information. So I'm still learning, and I'm finding the things I'm learning are so heartbreaking. They are so heartbreaking. I keep learning. So even you, that fell far. So even you who is actually learning about your history, you're still going to learn more. For those wondering what fell, my crown actually fell like farther away from me. You're going to keep learning more, and don't give up. Do not give up. And in about episode 3, when looking back, I wanted to read a lot. I even forgot to read something from episode 2. But let's read it now. From Women Who Run with the Wolves, there is another excerpt still from chapter 8, I believe. I just put the pages and the paragraphs down, and it says, in addition, there is a very hidden aspect to most collectives that encourages oppression of women's wild, soulful, and creative lives. And that is the encouragement within the culture for women themselves to tell on one another and to sacrifice their sisters or brothers to strictures that do not reflect the relatedness found in the familial values of feminine nature. These include not only the encouraging of one woman to inform on another and therefore expose her to punishment for behaving in a feminine and integral manner, for registering appropriate horror or dissension to injustice, but also the encouraging of older women to collude in the physical, mental, and spiritual abuse of women who are younger, less powerful, or helpless, and the encouraging of young women to dismiss and neglect the needs of women who are far older than they. And that's something that's happened in the family I come from, both my paternal side and maternal side. Even today, it still happens. To date, it still happens. And it's like it keeps getting worse with each generation. It's like I'm going to outdo my auntie in the horrible things she did to me, and I'm going to make my niece have it worse. It's so horrible. And yes, I cut off people. Yes, I went no contact and stuff. It is horrible. I'm going to outdo what my mother did to me and do it to my daughters. I'm going to outdo all the horrible things the men in my family did to me and do it to the women who descend from me, or the women in the family who I'll come across, the younger ones. And then the younger ones will be like, I'm going to prove to my older cousin, to my older auntie, to my mother, how they're less of a woman, how I am much better than them and stuff. It's horrible to see. It's horrible to experience. It is heartbreaking. It's very horrible because I personally believe that women are each other's best friends and women need each other. There is nothing a man will do for you better than your fellow woman. And yes, there's somebody somewhere who's being treated so well by men than the women she grew up with, than her own mother. And I've been there. I've never sat down and thought, oh, men are better than women and stuff. I'm talking about I have actually been treated much better than men in relationships than I have been treated by my own family members, both men and women. Even like just random men who I'm not in a relationship with or anything, they've treated me much better than the women I've grown up with. And I've asked myself this question every year about how horrible this realization is. Consciously, I'm like, men are treating me better than the women I grew up with. And I'm not, for me, I'm not saying that women are each other's enemies. I'm like, what's so wrong? What is this deep-seated anger and enmity in the families I come from, that women are like this? Somebody else could be like, yeah, women are each other's enemies and stuff. And I'm like, wow. And to me, I'm just sitting there and thinking, how can I do better? I don't want any woman to feel how I have felt, to experience what I have experienced, and start treating her fellow women as enemies, or her fellow woman as an enemy. Because I promise you, if you open your eyes and you look around, it's your women who will come through for you. When you have a child and you can't breastfeed, you think a man will breastfeed your child? Yeah, the man might probably buy for you formula, but when you have your community of women, you're sorted. When the baby is unable to latch and you don't know how to breastfeed, you think a man, maybe the doctor in the hospital, probably, but they're not well versed in women's bodies and stuff. Maybe will a man actually teach you tips and tricks and hacks on how the baby can latch? When you've given birth via CS, do you think a man will teach you about the different pains you're feeling? Maybe a doctor, based on what is read in the textbook, and how to manage and everything. Your fellow woman who's dealt with women who've had CS births will help you. Your fellow woman who's had a CS birth will help you. When you can't pay your children's fees, it's your fellow men who will be there. It's them. When there are funerals, have you seen how women come through for each other? Have you seen? Your fellow women are not your enemies. And it's in this episode, talking about this episode, where I want to talk about this book by the River Piedra I Sat Down and Wept. I've told you guys how I bought it, right? I saw a tweet, and it was in the previous previous recording that got deleted. I saw a tweet about when I cry, my ancestors will hear me, and when they see my tears, they'll not be happy and they'll come for you. And what I thought about was by the River Piedra I sat down and wept. So I went to buy this book and I came home with it. And then I just looked up again and I saw it's part of a trilogy. Book 2 is called Veronica Decides to Die, and book 3 is called The Devil and Miss Prim. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to buy the remaining books. So the next day I went to Textbook Center and I only found Veronica Decides to Die. The Devil and Miss Prim was sold out everywhere, both online and in all stores in the country. So I just have these two. And I was reading this book this week, or it was last week, I think it was this week, it must have been this week. And I opened it and I saw in the acknowledgements, dedications, and for Matthew Law for not having forgotten a sage question from the I Ching, perseverance is favourable. And if I've already spoken about this, please forgive me. This is like the 4th time I'm recording this episode because the episodes kept on getting corrupted. So I've been repeating the same thing over and over again. And it made me remember that I have I Ching cards I'm supposed to be working. Wow. See, Mercury is retrograde for real. Like Mercury, you're getting out of retrograde tomorrow. As you watch this episode on the 15th of December at 11:56 p.m. and you're going out with a bang. Yani unafunga mwaka na mimi. To mean Mercury retrograde has said that she's ending the year with me. So I was talking about, I actually have a deck of I Ching cards over here. And I've been slacking on using them and stuff. I just have them. And I went and I also have the Book of Changes. I was supposed to be reading it. I started reading it because of what I read in By the River Piedra I sat down and wept. And I thought, which card talks about perseverance is favourable? Because I did not think it's just a general teaching. I felt like there's a particular card that talks about that. And when I went to search, it was card 34. And what's interesting is when I first had this deck made, card 34 was missing. They had not printed it out. So I wrote down that I need to have card 34 redone, plus other cards I was adding and remaking in my new deck because I found a new place to print my cards and I liked the ink much better. So I sent them the documents I needed to be redone and for new cards, and they accidentally printed the whole I Ching deck again. Those are 64 cards, by the way. And I was like, you know what, it's okay, I'll just come for them. There's nothing wrong with having 2 copies of the same deck. Who knows why I have 2 copies of the same deck. And the card that was missing is the card where perseverance is favourable. It's mentioned. And that card, as I mentioned, is card 34 and its power. And I believe it's the power of the great. I will never forget how that card looks like. You know, if the people watching this video are the ones who are going to be able to see these cards. This is how the I Ching cards look like. If you know what the I Ching is. This is literally how the cards look like. You see all those lines. You see, like there are 2 cards I'm holding up now, and they look the same, but they are not the same. They are not the same. That is, and the cards are modesty, and enthusiasm. Oh my God, I'm unable to speak. Modesty and enthusiasm, when you look at them, they look similar, but those cards are not the same because in enthusiasm, the 4th line, in modesty and enthusiasm, the 3rd line has moved. It's kind of complicated to explain if you don't understand this, but it's like the 3rd line has moved to the 4th line. The 3rd line in modesty has moved to the 4th line in enthusiasm. So the cards look the same, but they are not the same. So I was like, you know what? I need to get onto learning them, and there are 64 cards, by the way. So reading that showed me that I need to go and read on this. And the card number 34, power, is that card. It describes weakness being on the outside and strength being on the inside, which is not a good thing. It's like the citizens are protecting the politicians. Like the weak link is on the inside. The weak link is on the outside, and then the strength is on the inside. And what would happen is it would crumble. Such a government would crumble, such a community would crumble. It's also talking about when the children are the ones protecting the parents, when it's the parents who should be protecting the children. Crumble. It's talking about like how we've spoken about here, when the younger women are being awful and neglectful of the older women, and when the older women are being awful and neglectful of the younger women, the older women should be showing the younger women the ropes and protecting them. The younger women who are now stronger should be respecting the older women and helping them where they can, and not making the same mistakes as the older women made. But that's not what is happening. Complicated and all. And something else I wanted to read, because we're coming to the conclusion of this episode, is I wanted to read you chapter 6 from this journal I have. This journal I have is called Inspiring Revolution. And this morning, as I was reading chapter 6, I didn't even finish reading chapter 6. I just began reading it. I was like, I have to read this on my episode. And chapter 6 talks about comparison versus universe. And universe, not with a U, letter U, but a Y-O-U, comparison versus universe. So it says, Dear reader, as I mentioned, one of the crippling fears I experienced when applying for my dream job was that there are probably better applicants than me. Let's talk about this. What makes you you? And you know what's interesting is that in episode 1 of this podcast, or is it episode 2, we spoke about what makes you you. That's something we've spoken about in this podcast anyway. So Irene, the creator of this book, she's also the current Miss Universe Kenya. She stepped down, but the title is the title. She says, I term it as a whole universe inside us. Think of everything you have done so far, your environment, your personality, your skills. The vast universe that is you is what sets you apart. It is wild that someone with these convictions, she's speaking about herself, can still fall victim to thoughts that there are better applicants because of the root of this statement is comparison. And if I truly am to live according to my convictions, I should have crushed the voice of comparison by holding on to my uniqueness. Because as much as that might be true, that there is someone better than you in one area, say programming, if I compare them against your vast universe, I will find that they cannot be you. Well, what consists of this universe, you might ask? Then she goes on to mention 3 components of this universe. The first one is considering environment and community. The second one is soulmates and dreams. And the third one is personality. And in considering environment and community, she gives a short story about how working during a pad drive with an amazing team of period poverty champions, Heals for Pads and Pad Mad. And they shared with her the story about a lady who comes from an underserved and underprivileged community. And this lady had the wonderful idea of using agricultural waste and turning that into affordable sanitary pads. So now you see, if this lady sat down and thought, now what do I have to offer? Somebody has better to offer than me. Somebody's doing it better than me. Thinking about all the other brands of pads and what everybody else in the world was doing. And she talked down on herself and she killed her own dreams. She would have not benefited her community of women with these pads she made, because she made reusable pads from agricultural waste. So she considered her environment and her community. When you talk about soulmates and dreams, she now talks about 2 friends. These are friends she made in high school, and they're still friends up to date. And she talks about how one of her friends, who is called Connie, loved dancing and wanted to start a dance studio, but she did not know how to do it. So Irene, not knowing how to dance, said that, you know what, I'm going to be your dance partner. So she learned choreography for different dances to dance with her friend Connie and everything. And she ended up discovering things about herself. And Irene is a pageant queen. So if you know anything about pageantry, you do know that things like talents and dancing are a big part of it. And if you watch all of Irene's competitions, you can see how great of a dancer she is. And I bet there are more things she learned more than dancing, because to me, I'm picking out the dancing part. There are more things she learned about herself. Now imagine if Irene just sat there with her friend and be like, guy, woye tutafanya aje? How will we do this? We don't have the money, we don't have the studio, we don't have the recording equipment and everything. anything. We don't have anything. How will you do this? And then she ended up crushing her friend's dream because of that. Would Irene have learned things about herself? No. Would Irene's friend's dream have come true? No. And it reminds me to this excerpt I read from Women Who Run with the Wolves. If you're striving to do something you value, it is so important to surround yourself with people who unequivocally support your work. Irene unequivocally supported Connie's work and dreams, like what Connie wanted. And now they have a dance studio. They are co-founders of a dance studio called the Mansion Dance Studio in Kahawa Sukari. I believe it's in Kahawa Sukari. I'm putting it on the screen. It's in the description box. In whatever you're listening this from, it's in the description box. Okay, this podcast goes on Spotify and YouTube and Wattpad. So on Wattpad, I've also put in the brackets if I've said the right place or not. So that's a dance studio. There's dancing. They also teach ballet to children. They teach children ballet. There's yoga. There's Pilates. I believe there's Pilates. Everything is just there. It's just not a gym where you can go and lift weights and stuff. I haven't seen that. Maybe it's a development they'll add. I don't know, but I've just not seen that in the Mansion Dance Studio. So imagine if Irene just decided to be a Debbie Downer on her friend's dreams. Would they have grown? No. And now the next part is when she's talking about her other friend. Her other friend who is called Chiri. Chiri had Irene's dream. Irene went to visit a children's orphanage called Utugi Children's Home. And Chiri just opened her wallet, the money that was in there, and she said, "This is my investment in you." And Irene also goes to talk about how the same year, the same way she showed up for Chiri, Connie also showed up for her. And I really find their friendship so admirable. Very, very admirable. Because the way these three girls show up for each other, they really prove this point where I say women are not each other's enemies. They show up for each other so seriously. And I've seen it in other different communities. When I decided one day, I think I was 19, back in my Lover Girl era. And I think I've mentioned that Lover Girl era. You have not mentioned it in this episode. I'm sorry, I cannot go redo it because it was when I was talking about a year without love. I decided, one day I woke up and I decided, actually, it was my heartbreak era, not Lover Girl. It was like my Lover Girl era, then my heartbreak era. I was like, I am going to unfollow all the pages that don't serve me. That was like celebrities, gossip, friends, people I went to high school with. I'm actually, even currently, I'm actively unfollowing people I went to high school and primary school with, because why am I just following you out of loyalty because we went to the same school? If I remain with 200 followers, I'm also removing them as followers. If I remain with 200 followers, it's okay. I'm happy with my 200 followers on Instagram. So these guys have shown up for each other. And I was saying, like, back when I was unfollowing people and stuff and making a change in my life, I think I was 19 or maybe I was 20 or 21. I don't quite remember. One of those years, I started following people who are actually beneficial to my growth, to my well-being and all. And I came across two people, Supercent and Judy. Daryl, Bibi Judy. Jessica Dupat. I hope I'm saying her second name well. I came across them and I liked everything they do. Then I came to learn that they're friends and I was like, wow. And I came to learn about the circle of friends. I was only interested in Jessica and Supercent because I don't want to have information overload and stuff. I wanted people who I can be like watching and learning from. So it's not like I have so many people I don't even know who to learn from and stuff. I was looking at the community of friends and I was like, wow, I would love that. But I've also come to understand the friendships and sense of community I'm seeing with Irene, Chiri, and Connie, that I'm seeing with Supercent, that I am seeing with Judy, with their communities. Not everybody gets that, especially at all stages of their life. Some people will never get that, but doesn't mean that they'll be lonely for life. You see, you admire, and you decide you'll be that community for the women who come after you. You will teach the women who come after you that Because if you keep forcing things that are not working, you will get hurt. I've always spoken about it in my friendships and all of that, and also about my heartbreak. It wasn't like romance, it was also the friendship. It's like I never learned, by the way, because that was so far away before my frontal lobe formed, and the same things happened to me again after my frontal lobe formed. So it was very, very, very admirable. And she ends this second component by asking, what kind of impact can your circle have in your life, and what kind of impact can you have on your inner circle? Now, you see, the impact my circle had in my life was to derail me and make me feel lowly about myself. I'm not just talking about like the friends I chose, even the family I came from, the people I was around. Because when we talk about a year without romance, which reminds me of A Year Without Rain. I got that title because I think about A Year Without Rain. And I can't remember the song or the movie or whatever I got that title from, A Year Without Rain. But I did that because I was doubting who I am. And that's because the people who I was around and who were around me, they always made me doubt who I am. Even when I go to, was I love bombing people? They made me doubt who I am. And you see, this year, with all the work I've been putting in, with all the work on learning the virtue of selfishness and practicing it, I have come to see that I was sleeping with the enemy. There was a monster under my bed. And the people who were around me, my circle, and they're making me doubt myself and everything, were making me create a version of myself that embodies all the bad things they're projecting onto me. And that became the monster under my bed. That was horrible. That was horrible. And I'm glad I learned it. People tell me, older women, other people, actually it's older women who tell me, happier older women tell me, you know, you've learned these things so soon in life, and that's really good. You don't have to be like us who are actually still learning the things you have already learned. And I'm so proud of myself, and I know my ancestors are proud of me. Like the things I have done, and I have felt how proud my ancestors are of me. I have literally felt it. And what kind of impact can I have on my inner circle? I believe I'm already a positive impact to them, but I wanna be an impact to the women who come after me. They don't have to come from me. They don't have to descend from me. They don't have to be related to me, whether they come from a niece or a cousin or a sibling. No. Any girl who was born the second after I was born, the microsecond after I was born, I want some way, somehow, to touch their lives and make them a better woman to themselves, to give themselves more grace, to be so kind and loving to themselves, to give themselves so much grace that this whole women eat women society ends. It's got to end. It really has got to end. And finally, the third component is on personality, where Irene shares that in her family, she's been the most expressive person. In her family, they're not so expressive. And she got to the point where she managed to stifle her emotions and her expressions and all, and she felt so proud of herself. But with time, she came to learn, which I'm going to read for you. Well, I now see my personality makes me empathetic enough to be a great teacher and a good friend. And this actually opened doors to entrepreneurship with the dance studio business I talked about higher up in this chapter. In turn, entrepreneurship makes me a better programmer, and the ripple effect continues. Now, dear reader, what if I was to deny these things as part of my universe? You guys too who are listening, imagine if I denied myself who I was. I'd never have this podcast. I would never embrace the color pink in my crown, you see. Imagine if I stifled who I really am because of what people said around me, what people said about me. Imagine if I let people succeed in making me small, making me live so quietly to the point where nobody knows I exist. In as much as I have a goal to reach more women, I don't even need to know these women one on one. I actually am not looking forward to knowing the women who I have touched. It's not my goal. It's not my goal to know who you are. But some way, somehow, I know I've already touched certain women. Some way, somehow, women around the world, girls around the world, near me, far from me, are going to come across what I have done even after I am gone from this earth. They will come across what I have done and will impact them so positively. They will have no choice but to become the best versions of themselves and not hurt themselves or any other woman, and the world will be a better place to live in. And every single journal chapter introduction has a journal prompt so that you can go and write into it, because you can see there are note pages over here. You can go and write into it. And the journal prompt here is: reflect on how your upbringing and community have influenced your sense of self and uniqueness. And I've already spoken about that. Like, I've grown up in a significantly negative, soul-killing, soul-crushing community. But I've risen above that. Think about the people who have been supportive and influential in your journey. How have they shaped your path? And I bet there's someone who's listening to this and they're like, I've never had support. I've always been on my own. And if you've always been on your own, what has that taught you? Are you rising above the negativity they were putting on you, pouring on you? Or are you letting them win? Are you letting them have the last laugh? Are you shaping your path, or are you continuing to the paths that have worked against the women who came before you? Yeah, I do know men are listening to this, but I am a social change warrior for women. Reflect on your passions. You know about that. I cannot, for the life of me or even for the death of me, stifle my passions. Look, I have this I Ching deck. Actually, have two. I have an astrology deck. I have my own oracle deck. I have different decks. I have books. I keep buying books. Oh my god. And I even didn't tell you guys properly about these books. I went to buy Aleph because a synchronity happened in my life, and I had just seen the back of this book, one page here, one part here, and it was talking about, and the woman he betrayed in an act of cowardice so far reaching that it prevents. It's something about a past life. Yeah, she is the woman Paulo loved 500 years ago. I was like, oh my god, past life things, and I've been looking into that. So I bought that. Then I ended up buying By the River Piedra I, Saturn and Wept. Then I ended up buying Veronica Decides to Die. And I kept on going on a rabbit hole of buying books. I cannot stifle my passions for the life of me. Me being a psychologist, a researcher, me fighting for social change, not like fighting like this. I fight for social change through my words, through everything I write, everything I do. Me working as a spiritual worker, even the way I help my clients and the way they keep coming back. I cannot stifle my passions. And then reflect on aspects of your personality. I don't know if you've noticed how long have I been looking down and this crown hasn't fallen, This crown hasn't fallen. Like, my personality is also pink. Look at this. This is pink. Look at my sofa. It's pink. The blanket I use when I said I'm sleeping on my sofa or I'm just coming to chill in the living room on a cold day, it's pink. My plushes over here are pink. I'm looking at two pink bags, actually. I'm looking at other pink things over there. I'm looking at so many pink things there. Like, reflect on aspects of your personality. And what's interesting is, when I was reading chapter 6 of this journal today, I did not read the journal prompt. I just reached like personality, and I was like, I have to talk about this in this podcast episode. So that's it. But I have to end this with like a poem, because in every episode I end with a poem. And given that this year began with a new moon in Capricorn, 2024 began the new moon in Capricorn on January 11th. The first new moon in 2024 was the new moon in Capricorn. Given that December 1st was new moon in Sagittarius, so December began the new moon, and given that December 31st is going to be a new moon in Capricorn, new moon in Sagittarius December 1st, new moon in Capricorn December 31st, which is literally the same sign that began the beginning of the year. And because there are always new moons, I'm just going to say, I have multiple opportunities to start over. I will revise myself, and I can revise myself as many times as I want. And there's a song, I remember the lyric, and I think it's called The New Me, something The New Me. And this song, it's affirmation music. There's a part this lady says, the universe, and I will rewrite that verse. I'll reverse. Like, you rewrite your life however many times you want to rewrite it. You redo your chapters however many times you want to redo them. But also remember that you cannot keep dwelling on the same chapter and hoping it ends differently. It's already ended. And something I watched, I think it was the second last episode of some series I watched. It's horror. What's it called? No, I'm not even going to mention it because I'm not promoting things here. There's a part this boy says once a story has been written, you cannot rewrite it. But you see, your story in your future has not yet been written. And even if you see the path you're taking is going to lead you in a detrimental path, you can always rewrite it. Actually, you can change it. It's already been written, so you can change it. You can look at the stories of the women, the people who came before you, and you'll be like, I'm not going to take that path. I'm going to rewrite my story differently. Just because they did things this way doesn't mean I have to do it that way. So yeah, it's been great. Happy New Year 2025. Actually, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. But before that, I've realized that I have another realization. I've realized that I cannot be a social justice warrior, but I can be a social change warrior. Like, I don't even like being a social justice warrior. And that's something I learned from revisiting episode 2, where we talk about generational curses and how I can't save anyone. Social change, yes, because I get to the root of things. And if you want to deal with something, get to the root of it and deal with the root. So yeah, it's been a long episode. I'm not sure I want to edit anything out because I want it to feel like we were actually having a conversation, like one-on-one, so you feel like you're actually here. So yeah, that's it. I bet my neighbors who've been walking out here wondering, this girl has been speaking since 6 p.m. and now it's like 8 p.m. Hanyamazi. The year started in the same new moon that it's ending in. And Capricorn is a sign of doing hard things. So yeah, I can do hard things. You can do hard things. That hard thing you started at the beginning of the year and you're like, oh my God, I can't go on with this. Or you started some time ago. This is your do-over. I have infinite do-overs. Thank you for being here.